Hi, good morning. Like Alex said, I agree with a lot of what you said. It's pretty exciting to work at NASA and to work with NASA images every day. And so I have a lot to show you, so I'm going to get right to it. Just real quickly about myself. My background is I'm not a scientist or a big NASA freak or anything. For most of my career, I worked as a photojournalist and a photographer in Washington, D.C., covering Capitol Hill, and working as a photo editor, doing some other things. I'm also get to go out and shoot launches every once in a while. I love travel photography and get to shoot some cool things at NASA Goddard, where I work, like when Leonardo DiCaprio came to film Before the Flood, if anybody saw that. So just real quickly, NASA is a really large organization in the United States, and there's field centers across the United States. I work at NASA Goddard Space Flight Center, which is right outside of Washington, D.C. I love this quote about Goddard. It's a special place, and what makes it so special is that it's one of few organizations on Earth that can do it all. Imagine it, build it, test it, launch it, operate it, and reap the scientific benefits. I have a short clip here to show you. Since I work with images, a part of my job is also sharing them on social media. And it was the end of last year, and we were sitting around, and I was trying to think of something that we could do to do an end-of-the-year wrap-up. And I thought, how about a mixtape? And so I just put this in here to give you guys an idea of what NASA Goddard is and what kind of work we do. Oops. It didn't play. Nope. Oh, I'll try one more time. No. Can you guys make it play? There you go. Yeah, that's NASA Goddard. So that's all at the Space Flight Center where I work. Lots of amazing people behind making all of that happen. So this is what I'm going to talk about today, the different areas where NASA has images. And so I'm talking about satellite imagery, of course, from the various missions and satellites, animations and visualizations, and NASA photographers. So jumping in, oops. So that's a good mix of some satellites. The one on the left is the Hubble Space Telescope, and the other two are some Earth-observing satellites. So a lot of people might recognize this image. It's probably one of NASA's most famous images. It's probably one of NASA Goddard's most seen images ever. 10 years ago, when the iPhone came out, this was the image that was on the front of the phone. And 8 years ago, when I started at Goddard, the person who hired me said, nobody knows that this image is from NASA. Nobody knows that this image is from NASA Goddard. And it was the beginning of social media. So as soon as we started releasing these kinds of images on social media, it was a huge hit. We really noticed that pretty quickly people connect in a strong kind of way with these pictures. This is a newer version. The old version that I just showed of the blue marble was 2002. This we call the black marble. It's an image of Earth at night. It's a composite image taken from a couple of different satellites. This we just released in 2017, so that's fairly new. So one of the things about Goddard is it has the largest organization of Earth scientists of anywhere in the world. And so we have a whole fleet of Earth satellites that are circling the Earth that we're constantly pulling data and information and images from. But it's images like this that sort of get the public's attention when there's a huge volcano erupting in Iceland and airports are shut down. People might remember that. Or this was, I think, Hurricane Sandy. So seeing these types of images from space really make a difference for people when they're talking about huge storms. And then there's just like really interesting, this is like a false color image from Landsat. This NASA just released this image yesterday, so I was just updating my PowerPoint this morning. This is a massive iceberg that just broke away from Antarctica yesterday. It's called from the Larsen Sea ice shelf. It's this piece, and it's the part that looks sort of oval there, is more than 1 trillion tons, and scientists believe that the iceberg is more than 3 times the size of the greater London area. So that's like all of a sudden there's like this giant iceberg floating around. But to let you know, scientists believe that it's normal and that these types of things happen. What's really unusual about this one is that it's all stayed together. It's one big chunk that just broke off. So moving on to the moon, NASA has the Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter. This is a picture of the Tycho crater, and these images are detailed enough that you can see a boulder in the background that's 120 meters wide. And the image itself spans about 1,200 meters. I mean, before LRO, that's what we call it. There's lots of acronyms at NASA, but before we had LRO, we were never seeing detailed images of the moon before. This is also from LRO. It's the Tycho crater. To give some perspective, the summit of the central peak there is 1.25 miles above the crater floor. And that's just an interesting image that shows a track from a boulder. So the idea is that LRO is mapping the moon. And if NASA wants to go back, they want to have a detailed idea of where would be the safest and best place for astronauts to do research and where they can land and take off from. And all the data from LRO is going to help us do that. Next up is the Solar Dynamics Observatory, SDO. This mission was designed to understand the cause of solar variability and its impact on Earth. SDO is designed to help understand the sun's influence on Earth and near-Earth space. This is a really cool picture. This is the transit of Venus. I don't know if people remember that from 2012. And if you missed it, you're going to have to wait till 2117 to see it again, or either that or download this picture from NASA. This is also from SDO. This is a prominence eruption from the sun. The red glowing loop there on the side is plasma, which is comprised of like hot gas. That's electrically charged hydrogen and helium. This is pretty cool. Don't worry, we're really not that close to the sun. So it is to scale, but we're not that close. So moving on to Hubble, which is probably NASA's most famous satellite. This is one of Hubble's most iconic images and probably most well-known images called Pillars of Creation. This was taken in 1995. This is pretty cool. This is an observation from 2015 of Comet Lovejoy when it had a near-Earth pass. And this image isn't just, sometimes scientists are able to take data from various telescopes. This is taken from Hubble, from Spitzer, and from the Sondra telescope of Cassiopeia A, which is kind of a beautiful supernova remnant. Oops. This is another Hubble image. This is called Hubble's Extreme Deep Field. This was released in 2012. And so this represents a total of a 2 million second, which is approximately 23 days, exposure collected over 10 years. So this is science in the making over a 10-year period of time. This image contains approximately 5,500 galleries, the oldest of which are seen as they were 13.2 billion years ago. And so they'd have to have a NASA scientist here to be able to get into those kind of details. But sometimes it's kind of mind-boggling when you're looking at an image like this every day. So moving on to Cassini, this particular spacecraft is orbiting Saturn and has been there since 2004. And if you've seen pictures of Saturn, since then, it's most likely come from Cassini. These images are pretty dynamic. This is a pretty cool one. It's a close-up view of a massive hurricane swirling on Saturn's North Pole. The scientists measured that the size of this storm is 1,200 miles across with cloud speeds of up to 330 miles an hour. So that's a pretty major storm. I hear you guys have had a lot of rain in Berlin, but I guess it's probably nothing like that. Here's another Cassini image. This, we share a lot of pictures at NASA, and I find that the Hubble images that I just had up are always really popular. But also what's really popular are images of Earth from space. And you might be wondering, why am I talking about Earth? But if you see that little dot in the bottom right, that's Earth, that's us. And if you zoomed in even closer to the right, you'd be able to see our moon. Cassini was about 900 million miles away from Earth when it snapped this picture. Here's one last image I have of Cassini. This is Saturn's rings with 3 of its moons. Okay, so next up is NASA's Juno mission, which just released some brand new images yesterday as well, and I have those in here. But Juno's looking at Jupiter, which is a giant gas planet, and they're looking to improve our understanding of the solar system's beginnings by revealing the origin and evolution of Jupiter. Specifically, looking at how much water might be in Jupiter's atmosphere. Because as most people know, it's the search for water is the search for life, and this particular mission is one of the major reasons what they're doing there. This is a detailed image from Juno. This was just released in May. This is a pretty new image. So is this one as well. Juno just started returning images. This is Jupiter's south pole, and it's enhanced. The color in this is enhanced to sort of bring out the clouds and the swirling storms in the pole. So this came out yesterday. Juno just had its closest approach to Jupiter just on the 10th. And so the images just came down last night. I got home and I saw that they had released these pictures, so I added this. So this is probably the most detailed image that we've ever seen of Jupiter's great red spot. The spot is about 10,000 miles wide, and this spot is also a storm that scientists have been monitoring since 1830, and they believe that this storm has existed on Jupiter for 350 years. So the next mission I'm going to talk about in images is New Horizons. New Horizons was a mission that spent a little, 9.5 years traveling to Pluto, which is a dwarf planet, not a planet, but and we don't want to get into that discussion as well. But so some of our first observations of Pluto were this. It's like an 8-bit image or something. Over the years, we were able to capture it, but we never really had a clear view of what Pluto looked like until New Horizons came by after. Oh, did I mention it? It took 10 years to get there and traveled 4.6 billion miles. So here's a quick little, oops, darn it. I won't play. Oh, there it goes. It's not playing. There it goes. That's an evolution of images of Pluto over the years. The ones towards the end, where it starts looking like this image, is as New Horizons got closer, it was taking images, and this was the image that it took at its closest approach. So after New Horizons, this is still Pluto. After New Horizons went by, it's now past Pluto, and that's the sun coming up behind it. It's almost like a sunrise over Pluto. So I just have a couple of clips here. So I talked about all these different satellites, and it's a lot of ways in which NASA collects data. And so once they have this data, we make animations and visualizations to portray the information that's been collected. And I have a couple of clips here that will show you some of the types of things that we do. So that's what it looks like. So those are all, this is, they're like giant cameras, like flying around, Earth, taking pictures and collecting all kinds of different data. I thought this would be helpful for people to get an idea of how we collect the information. And let's see. There we go. That's from LRO. Those are perpetual ocean is sea currents. This is from Hubble. That's cool stuff. So moving on to photographers at NASA. We have photographers who are like mission photographers who work in clean rooms and photograph major milestones and photograph spacecraft as it's being built. This was shot at Goddard of the JWST. This as well is a mirror being snow clean by shooting it with CO2. Oh, no, that's not. This one was. Wait, sorry, I'm confused. That's, my things aren't lining up, sorry. It's an engineer working with the mirrors. And that's, so if folks who know Hubble, oops, you can go one back. The follow-up to Hubble will be the James Webb Space Telescope, and this is the primary mirror, and this was just built at Goddard. And this is a picture of it just before it was boxed up and shipped out. So of course, there's lots of rocket shots when you're a NASA photographer. This is a Soyuz rocket launch in Kazakhstan. This is, now that NASA no longer has the space shuttle, this is how NASA astronauts get to the International Space Station. And the way they get down is in those things. The International Space Station is 220 miles above Earth, and they get in these Soyuz and they drop down. I mean, they have these giant parachutes, thank you, that ease the landing, but just doesn't look fun to me. And so, of course, like covering, this was from the 7 Minutes of Terror. I don't know if people followed the story when NASA was sending the rover to Mars, and there was like this period of time where it didn't have connection to the rover, and it was like 7 minutes long, and this was the moment where they found out that it landed safely and it was going to work. Of course, lots of space shuttle images. The space shuttle program ran from '81 through 2011. This was taken at Kennedy Space Center. This is a pretty cool image that was shot at Webb's flight facility of an Antares rocket. This is a false color infrared image. So our photographers like to do some cool and fun things when they're shooting these. This is a night launch of a sounding rocket. Oh, this one's pretty cool. Yeah, that's a frog. We called it the frog photobombing, the lady launch. We never really found out if the frog survived, but I probably not. And it's real. That's a real picture. It's real. It was. I had all these phone calls, and I called, and I'm like, so you have to tell me for sure that this is really real before I start sending this out. This is a really cool mission that they've been doing out in Alaska for a couple of years. It's shooting sounded rockets into auroras to study auroras in the night sky. When they told me about that, I'm like, please send a photographer. And I couldn't talk about NASA photography without showing some Apollo images. I mean, I talked about Blue Marble and the Hubble images as being iconic images, but for a lot of people, when they think of NASA, these are the type of images that come to mind. I mean, they're still so cool. This was taken in 1968. They called this Earthrise. And what's interesting about this is this was the first time that humans had left Earth orbit to go to the moon. And it also was the first time that there were humans far enough in space to see all of Earth. And one of the astronauts that was on this Apollo mission came up with this quote, and I always think it's really interesting. We came all this way to explore the moon, and the most important thing is that we discovered Earth. Okay, so some people here might recognize this is Astro Alex, a ESA German-born astronaut taking a selfie on a spacewalk from the International Space Station. He was on the space station in 2014. And astronauts take really cool photos, right? Including picture of Berlin from space. So that is the cupola. It's an observatory module that was added to the space station a couple years ago for astronauts to conduct experiments, and some docking goes on there, but mostly a lot of observations of space. And this is where, if you follow these guys on Twitter, on Facebook, where they shoot the images of Earth. This is Italy's Samantha Cristoforti, who was the first Italian astronaut. And so, as you can imagine, astronauts get trained on all kinds of things, but when I came across this image, I thought it was really interesting. So they, of course, if they're up there shooting pictures, they have to teach them how to take pictures. This is 9/11 from the International Space Station after the terror attacks. Of course, some of the most dynamic images of storms come from the ISS. They have a pretty unique perspective. And then a lot of folks may have remembered just like 2 years ago, Scott Kelly spent a year, just short of a year, on the space station and was sharing images almost every day. Here's a few of his pictures. That's the Bahamas. And this pretty much wraps up my talk. Like I said, I work for NASA Goddard Space Flight Center, and we're on Facebook and Instagram and all of these places. If you like the images that you've seen, you can follow us along online. And thank you. Hope you enjoyed it.